doing things well beyond the ken of the vast majority of people, including the priests themselves. And they simply placed their orders, doubtless paid his fee, and got their reward when the faithful came in and did the arbit and gave their donations to the temple.
In Alexandria, in the early Christian period, there's startling evidence that verifies how important temple magic was. One priest of the time wrote, "We definitely need some striking miracle to advertise our temple. Folk are flocking like sheep after these barbarous new Galilean heresies." Heron, the brilliant scientist and inventor, was only too happy to oblige.
Heron was a master engineer. He was a master craftsman. He saw the opportunity and he put it together to the limit of the fabrication methods available to them at the time.
For temple worshippers, the magic began as soon as they walked through the door. Sometimes the magic began with the doors themselves.
The doors in major temples would have been massive affairs. They could be wood, they could be bronze, they would have lots of elaborate attachments of gold and ivory, and the opening and closing of them seems to have been something which was staged, rather like a piece of theatre. The staging would involve the priests, it could involve choirs who would sing sacred hymns, there would be burning of incense, the lighting of lamps.
Heron devoted much of his attention to ensuring that the opening and closing of the temple doors was as dramatic as possible. He even contrived to make it so that the doors opened automatically in synchronization with the altar sacrifice.
One of these devices was so arranged that as the altar heated up, the doors would open and then they would close when the sacrifice was over.
The automatic doors used simple mechanical principles, but they were invaluable in helping to reinforce the authority and prestige of the Egyptian priests. As the priest lit the fire on the altar, it heated the air inside a metal cylinder concealed underneath. This would force the water in it to go through a siphon into an enormous bucket. The bucket was suspended by chains from a system of weights and pulleys, which turned the doors on their pivots as the buckets became heavier. The temple doors would open as if by magic.
You have to remember that these devices at the time were only working in the temples. So for the average person, they would have never seen anything like this. So you have to imagine how completely awestruck they would have been when they arrived at the temples and the doors magically opened before them.
Heron used physics and mechanics to astound temple worshippers. The priests used other tools, particularly chemicals, to demonstrate the power of the gods.
Within temple trickery, you would have use of as much chemistry as was available to them at the time, and probably more than was available out on the streets, because these were the keepers of the secrets.
To maintain the sense of bewilderment and wonder in the mind of their pious observers, duplicity was vitally important.
A feature common to a lot of these ancient religions is the fact that they're mystery religions. The worshippers don't really know what's going on. That includes what they're eating and drinking. Food plays a key part in a lot of the rituals. This is a tree bark, logwood. Now, you put this into wine, which the worshippers drink. When they go to pass urine, it looks as though they're passing blood. If you then stop feeding them the tree bark, you've cured them of a debilitating condition. They're cured, they're healed. Power to the priest.
Not only food and drink, but the chemical properties of all kinds of common substances would be put to work by a priest anxious to maintain a spell over his congregation.
The chemistry is the chemistry of things which can be reduced by fire, and it is things which are available from readily available chemicals such as urine and feces and dung and whatever, which is useful because that gives you good sources of phosphorus, which glows in the dark, and of things which, when you rehydrate them after the fire, steam or crackle or fizz, something which to an innocent mind would be most impressive.
Soon, the number of temples competing for congregants became even greater. People were flocking to a new faith called Christianity. This forced priests to seek out ever more ingenious and impressive temple machines. Machines that could cause temples to roar with thunder and statues to speak. In the classical world, inventors and engineers created sophisticated machines that produced spectacular visual effects. But they also knew that the power of sound could instill fear and anticipation in credulous congregations. Many devices, some simple and others highly complex, were used to generate the sound effects for temples.
Because a lot of these early religious cults were based around a very theatrical style of worship, almost any device which enhanced that experience would be utilised. This little thing I'm holding is a little model we've made of a rhombus, which is where we get the word rhombus, as in the geometrical shape. It's a very archaic instrument. Most primitive cultures have got variations of this, usually called bull roarers, and in fact the Greeks used to call it the voice of Zeus. The way we operate this device is there's a longish string attached to it, but to make it actually rotate in the air we've got to give it a little spin, so I'll do that now.
There's very interesting evidence from ancient Egypt for manipulation of the gods, making gods speak, making gods move. But it wasn't until the Greek period and Roman period in Egypt that very interesting devices start to be used that become much more fancy.
They would go to the limits of the available physics, certainly the production of sound.
It's even believed that some of the treasures from the tomb of Tutankhamun were instruments through which the priests could create noises that the worshippers believed were the sounds of the gods.
There is one very critical ancient historian who reports that the jackal god and the bust of Re Harmachis are both equipped with speaking tubes. The speaking tube here is specifically to allow the temple priest to make noises as though from the mouth of the god.
Next to the catacombs below modern Alexandria, fresh evidence has recently been unearthed.
On this site, we did not only find the foundations of the antique temples, but we found other structures like for instance, underground passages. And we think that they were used by the priests to climb up into the altars to make some more trickery there, like talking to the people throughout the mouth of the statue.
Similar stories have circulated about these two colossal statues at Thebes. Originally, they guarded the approaches to the temple of the pharaoh Amenhotep III. The temple, one of the largest ever built in Egypt, has long since crumbled into dust or had its stone pillaged for other building projects. But the statues remain, impressive even in their ruinous state.
Well, the statues are fantastic because of their size, obviously. They're over 20 meters high. The Colossi were very famous throughout history, but the Greek and the Romans really put them on the map. And they were fascinated by them because due to an earthquake, one of the statues, the one on the right, actually made a strange whistling noise at certain times of day. A number of theories have been put forward for why what the sound was actually caused by. Some would say it was just the wind actually blowing through the statue. The Greeks were convinced that the god Memnon was actually contacting them, that it was acting as some form of oracle. Hence why the statues ended up with the name, the Colossi of Memnon, and actually were not named after Amenhotep at that point.
Some historians believe that Heron of Alexandria may have collaborated with the priests and inserted such a speaking tube. There are other examples of moaning statues from antiquity which also used mechanics to create sound.
One of the things that keeps cropping up are descriptions of moaning statues. We think these may have been used in temples to create a magical or mysterious effect, and possibly in tombs to prevent interference of grave goods and so on. This particular one is a low relief showing a figure of a gorgon, which is associated with Hades, so a tomb would be fairly appropriate. It works on the familiar displacement of water principle, which was common amongst the Alexandrian school. Basically, we're talking about a vessel filled with water which suddenly siphons into a closed vessel, dispelling the air and blowing some kind of noise-producing device. I'll fill it up now, and hopefully we should get sound.